Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed how a man's silence can fill a room louder than any argument? When an older man stops speaking, stops explaining, stops reacting, that's not peace. That's the sound of a heart that's learned too much. His silence isn't emptiness. It's the weight of everything he's already said that no one ever heard. Before we go deeper, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It tells me you're ready for the truth most people run from. You see, when a younger man goes quiet, it's often confusion or pride. But when an older man does it, it's understanding. It's surrender to a reality he's fought for years to change. He's seen that no amount of explaining fixes emotional distance, no amount of talking makes someone value presence over attention. So, he chooses silence, not out of weakness, but out of mastery. An older man's silence in a relationship says, "I've seen this before." It says, "I know where this leads." He no longer debates with ego. He no longer chases validation because he's learned that love cannot be argued into existence. His silence becomes his boundary. His calm becomes his armor. A woman who feels that silence often senses something deeper than words, a mirror reflecting her own emotional tone. If she has taken his presence for granted, that silence can be terrifying because it signals that something sacred has shifted. The man who once explained, justified, and tried to be understood has now withdrawn to the only safe place left, his inner world. This kind of silence isn't passive, it's powerful. It demands energy from anyone near it. It's a silent test that reveals who will step closer and who will step away. But here's the truth few want to face. Silence from an older man is rarely about anger. It's about clarity. He's not punishing anyone. He's protecting himself. He's preserving what's left of his peace after realizing not everyone deserves his emotional language. And if you ever encounter that silence, don't mistake it for indifference. It's a man who's finally done explaining what should have been understood long ago. That silence says everything. When an older man goes silent, it's not because he doesn't care. It's because he's seen what happens when he tries too hard. Every word he once used to build connection became a weapon turned back at him. Every attempt to open up was met with criticism, dismissal, or manipulation. Over time, he learned the hardest truth there is. Sometimes saying less protects you more than being understood ever could. He once thought love was built on constant communication, that if he just explained himself better, she'd finally see his heart. But experience taught him otherwise. It's not words that hold relationships together, it's respect. It's the feeling that your presence matters even when you're not performing. When that respect fades, a man's silence becomes the last remaining form of dignity he can hold. In that silence, he's not plotting revenge, he's healing. He's analyzing the moments that broke him, the ignored messages, the sharp tone, the emotional distance that grew day by day. He's realizing that the most dangerous thing he ever gave wasn't money, effort, or gifts. It was access to his peace. And now he's reclaiming it one quiet breath at a time. A woman might say, "He's cold, he doesn't care anymore." But that's not true. He cares, deeply, but he's learned to care from a distance. Silence is how he loves himself after being drained by trying to love someone who didn't listen. This stage of a man's life is misunderstood. Society calls it detachment, but it's really evolution. An older man doesn't withdraw because he's emotionless. He withdraws because he's emotionally aware. He's seen that not every storm needs to be fought. Some are better walked away from. His silence is not a wall, it's a filter. It filters chaos from peace, drama from meaning, noise from truth. And through that filter, he rediscovers something profound. Tranquility, the kind of peace that doesn't need to be proven, defended, or explained. So when a man stops speaking, don't assume he's given up. Understand that he's finally choosing himself over the cycle of being misunderstood. He's no longer trying to be heard, he's learning to be still, because in silence he finds the version of himself he lost, trying to please everyone else. There's something haunting about an older man's silence. It carries history. You can almost feel the ghosts of old conversations inside it, the echoes of words that once meant everything but now mean nothing. He remembers every time he tried to speak from the heart and was met with indifference, every time his vulnerability was mistaken for weakness, every time he swallowed his pride just to keep peace with someone who never valued the effort. Now his silence becomes his rebellion. Not the loud, angry kind, but the calm, steady kind that terrifies people used to control. Because silence is power. You can't argue with it. You can't twist it. You can't guilt it into reacting. And that's what makes it so unsettling. When a woman encounters this silence, she begins to realize that she can't reach him with drama anymore. She can't provoke him into defending himself. He's moved past that stage. He's learned that silence speaks louder than defense. It says, I've seen this before, and I'm not playing the same game again. And deep down, she knows. His silence means something final, not necessarily the end of the relationship, but the end of emotional dependency, the end of giving power to the wrong person. An older man who's been through heartbreak, betrayal, or emotional neglect doesn't silence himself to punish anyone. He does it because he's tired of betraying his own peace. He's realized that love without peace isn't love at all. It's chaos dressed in intimacy. In that quiet, he starts to rebuild, slowly, patiently. He listens to the sound of his own thoughts again. He begins to trust his instincts instead of suppressing them to keep others comfortable. That's the beauty of silence. It's not empty, it's full of rebuilding. And here's what's profound. When he speaks again, if he does, it will no longer come from a place of needing to be heard. It will come from strength, from self-respect, from knowing that silence refined his truth. Because in the end, the silence of an older man says this: I've finally learned that my peace is not up for discussion. That silence isn't retreat, it's rebirth. It's the moment he stops surviving love and starts mastering it. There comes a moment in every man's life when silence becomes sacred, especially for the older man who has loved deeply, lost heavily, and learned painfully. He no longer wastes energy trying to explain feelings to people who listen only to respond. He's been through too much noise, the kind that drains, confuses, and twists his truth. So now, he values peace more than connection. And that's something only time and heartbreak can teach. He remembers the days when he thought love meant always being available, always fixing, always forgiving. But one day, he realized that the more he spoke, the less he was heard. That's when he discovered a painful paradox. Silence often brings more clarity than conversation, because silence exposes who's truly invested and who's only entertained. When he stops speaking, the people around him reveal themselves. Those who genuinely care will notice the quiet and reach out with gentleness. The rest, they'll get angry, defensive, or distant, proving exactly why he went silent in the first place. Silence becomes a mirror, showing everyone who they really are when they can no longer control the narrative. Inside that stillness, the older man learns to detach with grace. He doesn't chase. He doesn't beg for understanding. He doesn't try to prove his worth. He's finally discovered something unshakable: self-trust. That deep, calm knowing that he no longer needs validation to feel whole. His silence now says, I trust myself enough not to explain myself. And there's power in that, the kind of power that can't be faked or forced. It's the kind of peace that unnerves people who once thrived on his emotional reactions, because they realize he no longer belongs to their chaos. In his quiet, he begins to move differently. He chooses his company carefully. He speaks less but means more. He no longer seeks to be understood. He seeks alignment. And when he senses dissonance, he doesn't argue. He simply distances, because silence has taught him that walking away in peace is far stronger than staying to prove a point. This is the silence that defines mature masculinity. Not absence, not neglect, but presence without performance. It's calm, it's centered, it's dangerous to those who mistake stillness for weakness. Because once a man learns the language of silence, he never wastes his words on noise again. Silence changes a man, especially an older one who's walked through years of disappointment and learned that not every heart deserves access to his truth. When he finally chooses silence, it's not out of pride. It's out of understanding that energy is a currency too. And he's done spending it where it brings no return. He no longer needs to convince anyone of his worth. The young version of him might have pleaded, argued, or tried to fix what was breaking. But this version, he lets silence speak for him, because he's learned that silence never lies. It tells the truth about who respects him, who values him, and who only misses the sound of his attention. His quiet becomes magnetic, not because he's cold, but because he's centered. There's something about a man who doesn't need to talk to prove his presence. Women feel that. They sense that stability, that calm confidence that says, "I've already been through the storms you're trying to start." And yet, many misunderstand this silence. They call him emotionally unavailable, detached, unbothered. But that's not it. He simply knows that peace isn't negotiable anymore. He's no longer addicted to fixing chaos or proving loyalty to those who question it. Silence for him is self-respect made visible. He might sit quietly at dinner while the world spins in noise around him, and yet his energy speaks louder than any voice in the room. It says, "I've stopped fighting battles that aren't mine." That's what wisdom looks like. That's what survival sounds like. And deep down, he knows something others often miss. Silence doesn't mean disconnection. It's a sacred space between reaction and response, between emotion and decision. It's where clarity is born. In that space, he becomes unshakable. He starts to move differently, slower, but more deliberate. He stops apologizing for his standards. He starts valuing his solitude instead of fearing it. Because in that silence, he's no longer lonely. He's free. And that's the transformation few ever talk about. The moment a man stops trying to be heard and instead becomes the man who doesn't need to explain himself to be understood, his silence becomes his statement, his calm becomes his strength, his peace becomes his legacy. There's a certain beauty in the silence of an older man, the kind that comes after years of giving, losing, and learning what truly matters. It's not the silence of defeat. It's the silence of a man who's finally at peace with himself. You can see it in his eyes. Calm, steady, unreadable. Not because he's hiding pain, but because he's made peace with it. He doesn't need to win arguments. He doesn't need to prove love. His silence now carries wisdom, the kind that says, "I've learned that peace is more valuable than being right." That kind of silence can shake a relationship to its core. Because when a man stops explaining, the energy shifts. It forces the other person to reflect, not on what was said, but on what wasn't. It invites accountability without a single word. That's the silent power of emotional maturity. It no longer chases attention, it commands respect. He's not cold, he's clear. He's not detached, he's disciplined. He's not avoiding, he's aligning. And when you reach that level of understanding, silence becomes your greatest ally. It's where you hear the truth behind every word, where you sense who's with you out of love and who's there out of habit. In that stillness, he no longer fears being alone, because he's realized solitude is not emptiness. It's a reset. It's where a man reclaims his identity from everything that once drained it. He becomes sharper, calmer, more intentional. He stops performing for connection and starts embodying authenticity. And here's the paradox: that very silence, the one that once came from pain, now becomes the reason others are drawn to him. Because peace is magnetic. A man who speaks through calm presence instead of constant words carries a rare energy, the kind that says he's no longer seeking approval, only truth. So when you see an older man sitting quietly, don't mistake his silence for indifference. It's not that he has nothing to say, it's that he's finally learned not everything deserves a response. His silence holds stories, lessons, and boundaries all at once. It's the mark of a man who's mastered himself. Because in the end, the silence of an older man doesn't mean he's given up on love. It means he's found something deeper, love that begins with peace.